Welcome to the July 1st Lunch and Learn, a weekly series by the Sierra Fund explaining our programs and our projects to restore the Sierra and bring resiliency back to our communities. I'm going to start sharing the screen now. I'm excited to be presenting today on the topic of our Deer Creek Tribute Trail, Phase 4, the Nisenan Cultural Reclamation Corridor. Now, this is a project we've been working on for more than 10 years. And it's a project technically really of our Environmentally Healthy Communities program, because that nests most of the issues we raise. But as you'll see, this is one of the projects that pulls together all of the work that the Sierra Fund's involved in. It's multi-partner, multi-year, and it has a string through it that connects our mission to the project. And of course, our mission is to restore ecosystem community resiliency in the Sierra Nevada region, our region that was, of course, torn apart during the gold rush, looking for gold, with impacts on every single corner of where we live. The ecological footprint of the gold rush really stretches from the Sierra to the sea. The mines that were put into the meadows in the forests impacted the rivers, the fish, all of the wildlife, and the human beings that lived on the landscape. Our mission is to try to bring back resiliency. It won't be like it was when we began, but we do believe we can make a better place to live by being very consistent and clear in what we're trying to aim for. We are trying to put money into our area to improve resiliency. We don't really want to do random acts of conservation, acquiring this piece of property or building a trail over there. We're very interested in having the impacts of the gold rush understood. And as we do projects, we remediate, we take care of the problems we find on the landscape. So at every one of our Lunch and Learn series, we put this slide up about the 360-degree understanding of the problem, which leads us to engage the problem solvers, the people who were the most concerned about being involved in our work. We want to make sure that we have experts from all of the interdisciplinary areas engaging their minds on how we move forward to solve the problems we've identified. We often discover as we're trying to solve problems that while there are many good pieces of information out there, there's data gaps or policy gaps, whole areas of policy that are not even addressing the problems. And so we try to do pilot projects to fill those data gaps, explore those policies. As we figure out better policies and practices, we try to incorporate those into law and into practice. And in this way, we want to sustain the change of restoring resiliency to our lands. We have 3 programs that address this issue. The first is ecosystem resiliency. That one really looks at the, well, we'll go through those, our Environmentally Healthy Communities program and also our capacity building programs. Every element of what we do ties all 3 of these 3 together, but generally there's some stronger theme in each of our projects. In our ecosystem resiliency, we have 4 different targets we're looking at to try to restore the meadows, the forests, the natural resources, the rivers that were so decimated during the gold rush time. We have projects that will look at mine remediation in the forest as well as in the meadows. If you look at that left-hand side of the screen here, you'll see the Malakoff-Diggins scarps. Under them, you'll see a hydraulic mining feature, which is a hydraulic mine debris control dam in the middle of a forest. We're working on both of those elements of this problem. Meadow restoration, we are working up in 2 different high Sierra meadows to restore the capacity of those meadows to hold water higher, longer, colder. In fact, 3 of our Sierra Fund staff are up in the Clover Valley Meadow right now working on restoration activities. 3 is forest management. Our forests are riddled with abandoned mines and abandoned mines features like that debris control dam that I mentioned a moment ago. And we have a very interesting collaborative project with Yuba Water Agency, just beginning up on hundreds of thousands of acres that they own, trying to figure out what to do with the forests in the middle of, the meadows and the mines in the middle of their forests. Finally, we have a project that's probably our newest one to try to figure out how to restore fish to the High Sierra, blocked by dams that were put in place many years ago. Our second program to restore resiliency is focused on the human beings that live up here, the environmental exposures that we have that result from the gold rush era. course, all humans are living with lots of different sort of environmental exposures, from the greenhouse gases to lead in paint. But up where we live in the Sierra, we have unique exposures that are associated with our mining past, and that includes exposure from mercury in fish, dusty exposures when we recreate out on the land or work out on the land from these heavy metals that were left behind. There's water quality and water access issues that we face up here in the Sierra, and that's all made even worse by climate changes, which are, we believe, going to increase precipitation where we live as water instead of snow, and that driving hard rain is going to have lots of impacts on these features that we're so concerned about. Our third area of work is capacity building. We work in the capital to try to bring policies, to shape policies that are more effective for our region. We also work collaboratively with groups. We're members of the Regional Water Management Group. We've been engaged in a number of different collaborations, one of which I'm about to describe. The third is our Sierra Investment Services. That's essentially where we work with philanthropists to help them invest their money in programs that support the Sierra. So now that I've given the background of the Sierra Fund, this project here is exciting because, again, it has an ecosystem resiliency piece. It has a environmentally healthy communities piece, and it has a very important capacity building piece. This project, the Deer Creek Tribute Trail, really began more than 10 years ago with a group of community members that wanted to do something sounded so simple. Let's build the trail. The trail that they wanted to build went through mine-scarred lands, and so it raised immediately our first concern as we, the Sierra Fund, considered working on the project about building a trail through mine-scarred lands. And so we took some time to think about what dusty exposures might be out there. This built on our existing program, our Environmentally Healthy Communities program, to prevent dusty exposures. We'd already gone out and tested trails to see what kind of material was on the trails, what sort of landscapes they went through. If they went through an abandoned mine, we tested the trail, and well, this trail was proposed to go through an abandoned mine lands, and we found that it was going through some lands that had asbestos, naturally occurring asbestos on the trail. We also saw that there was old workings of old mill sites and such, and we began to understand that this trail was being proposed to go right through mine-scarred land. So we decided we needed to look into the potential dusty exposures and move the trail to protect the public walking on that trail from these sorts of dusty exposures. So one of our first activities when we got involved in this trail was to move that trail around. Why are we so concerned? Well, contaminated dust where we live has naturally occurring arsenic, which is everywhere around in our soil here. We have one of the largest loads of arsenic in our geology in the world. Interestingly, right up next to our gold. We also have a huge amount of asbestos in the California State rock, serpentine rock. That rock is fine when it's just like a big lump of arsenic, rock with arsenic in it is fine if it's underground, hundreds of feet. But when you haul it up to the surface and you crush it and then you start to use it to top trails or to build roads with, you can really have a dusty exposure problem with arsenic, asbestos, and lead, another naturally occurring metal where we live. So we started to look at this seemingly innocent project of building a trail and became concerned because we saw that this trail, here's a map of it that's a little bit out of date. Every time you build a new leg of the trail, you have to update the map, and this one doesn't have the newest trails on it. But as you see, the map, which weirdly is heading north, is going south. So anyway, if you live up here, it's a confusing map. They show that the names of the roads this goes down on are things like the Champion Mine Road. And that's because the Champion Mine Road was a road to an old, huge underground mine called the Champion Mine. And that road was going to be used as a big element of the trail. So we started to be concerned about this whole trail system and what kinds of dusty exposures might be there. But we also applauded the nature of the project. It had the goal of trying to build a monument to the Chinese pioneers that were here. Here you see the first leg of the trail we built. was onto connecting a piece of Bureau of Land Management land, a 900-acre parcel that was entirely landlocked. There was no legal way to get across the private property to get to that BLM parcel. So we wanted to try to create a recreation opportunity where we lived. We thought it was a good idea to open up that access. So we moved the trail and built a bridge across the Deer Creek, and we built that bridge in tribute to the Chinese pioneers of this region. As you can see, there's a Chinese character on the little entrance to the bridge. The top screen shows what that area looked like prior to a new bridge being built, and then you can see that same rock face on the bottom screen where the new Chinese tribute bridge is. We finished that in about, I think, 2012. You can see some of the partners there, everybody from the Fair Yuba Land Trust to the, well, the city of Nevada City played a role. We had American Rivers involved in this. The Chinese Historic Quarter and a number of other organizations worked together to build a mile-long trail. The second piece was the other second phase of this project was to build a second bridge and trail, this time in recognition of the First Nations people of this area, the Nisenan. The Nisenan are not a federally recognized tribe. They've only recently begun to come out in public and talk about their experience of being murdered and driven off the land here. And it took them some time, but they did want to work to become recognized. And so they worked with us together to build phase 2, a beautiful bridge and trail. This is the opening party of that when we invited the community to come down and see the new bridge and the new trail. Again, the top screen is what was there before we built the bridge. We worked closely with the tribe to have an understanding of how they wanted to be honored. With the Chinese pioneers, we ended up using a character that they chose that represented the characteristic of courage. And that's, they helped us to inform the design of their bridge and the entrance to their bridge. The same thing with the Nisenan people. They wanted to have it be as natural looking, as unobtrusive as possible. And they worked with us on a design. And then, of course, the day came where we opened the trail to the public, and we had 4 generations of Nisenan women and 3 generations of Nisenan men open the bridge for us. This experience opened a lot of relationships and a lot of information about how one works cross-culturally, building capacity with local people, building a trail that brings thousands of people out now. The use on this trail is quite extensive. And it let the Nisenan people say, you know, we want more than just a bridge. We would like some land. We would like to be recognized. We would like more resources. So the Sierra Fund heard that call, and we worked with them in phase 3 of this project to actually acquire a piece of property in their name. And this property, again, you see the same. Here's Nevada City. Here's the creek running down from Nevada City. The project area is a 32-acre parcel that the Sierra Fund spent many, many years working with the tribe and the resources agency and the owner of the property to try to acquire on behalf of the Nisenan, which we were successful doing in the fall of 2018. Now, the reason we were so interested and also concerned about this project was that we know, as I've mentioned repeatedly, this trail ran right through the old Champion mine. Here's a picture of the Champion mine, which is the Champion Providence mine complex is its final name, because these mines met underground, underneath Deer Creek. So if you see the left side of the picture, that's the Champion mine. If you look on the right side of the picture, that's the Providence mine. You can see the huge mine tailings that are spilling out of these conveyances coming out of the buildings where there was chlorine treatment, there was mercury retorting. Up over in the upper left-hand corner is the old Chinese village. Up in the right-hand corner is where the mill workers and mine workers worked. On this landscape, all of that material was removed and recycled for World War II. So now when you're out on that landscape, it doesn't look like an old mine. In fact, I'm going to go forward so you can see what it looks like now. I'll come back to these. Now it just looks like a meadow and some trees and maybe a couple of old footings. So we were concerned about the property. We thought it would be good to acquire it for the Indians, but we wanted to make sure we weren't giving them a nightmare. So we started off with historical research in the mining operations that were the Champion Mine Complex. The scientist that leads the Sierra Fund's work on this, Dr. Carrie Monahan, worked to collect soil samples appropriately using the right kinds of safe, clean hands to collect the materials, not exposing herself. We did the analysis of these materials. And in the course of doing that work, we did discover that there was a lot of heavy metal contamination in very isolated parts. So if you see this thing here, the little squares and dots, those are the old buildings. So what our informed judgmental sampling did was it went and looked at those buildings. If we knew there was chlorination treatment work done there, they tested for materials you might find in that sort of circumstance. If we knew there was mercury retorting, we looked for other materials. The assessment, which we're not going over here in detail today, because this is just one of the elements of the project, but it did find some heavy, some areas with heavy metal contamination that we are going to be avoiding. We're running the trail away from those. We're going to be putting fencing around. But it really helped us to understand and inform the acquisition of this property. This 32-acre property, as you can see, has a creek running through it. It's gorgeous. It's got a couple of open meadow areas, which would be appropriate for certain kinds of cultural practices. Also, on the right end of the property is the Nisenan Bridge, just past the parcel line. And right now, when you're on our Deer Creek Tribute Trail, you have to, you cross the beautiful Nisenan Bridge, but then you have to walk back up to the road and go all the way on the old Champion Mine Road and up and around this parcel, because until we purchased it and conveyed it to the Nisenan, it was privately held. It was private property. People couldn't walk across it. So our lovely bridge trail, you had to go on this dusty road with people driving their cars. So we're hoping to move that trail, and we're now able to move that trail segment off of the road and cross this Nisenan property. We recently were able to get funding to do that work. Again, we've done a lot of research out there. The Environmental Protection Agency became very interested in what we were doing as we were assessing this property prior to acquisition and prior to building a trail. And they actually gave us a targeted brownfield assessment grant. We went out and able to really get a good map, and that lets us then avoid the areas where people shouldn't be walking and instead temporarily build good fences that will keep the public out, but that will eventually, we want to help remediate this property. That is the end goal, so that the property is at the end of the day remediated. Part of the reason we were interested in this process was because over and over again, our allies in the environmental movement had built trails through property without doing the sort of assessment we did, or acquired property without doing the sort of assessment we did. And we are hoping to help our environmental conservation partners do a more careful and appropriate process, a due diligence process prior to either acquiring a property or building a trail. Because the point we made was our well-meaning friends just innocently building a trail were putting it right through the asbestos formation, the ore body. It was not safe where they were building that trail. It wasn't safe for the workers that were building it, and it wasn't going to be safe for the people walking on it. So we have to be careful about where we build trails, where we buy property in the gold country, because of this legacy problem of abandoned mines everywhere. This picture right here shows what we think is an appropriate due diligence process. You want to do a really good assessment of the property. You look for physical hazards, where there are physical hazards on the property that we acquired for the Nisenan. There's a couple of serious holes. There's some pretty steep cliffs. There's also chemical hazards that we identified. How do you remediate them? If you find no hazards, hallelujah. You can move forward to acquire it without worry. Or if you did find some hazards, you can clarify what's there, what it might cost to remediate them, and what sort of end uses would be appropriate now that you know what's on the property. The property you see here that's, that this little graph is put on front of is a dirt biking, motor dirt biking facility down in Forest Hill that's just covered with asbestos fibers. We tested this trail and found that 26% of the material on the trail was was asbestos fibers. So it's very important before you build a trail and before you acquire property to see what's there, get a good beat on it, and then have that inform the acquisition and the development. So to summarize, the best practices for acquisition and trail building is to know where to look. We have resources on this now. Our recreational trails assessment and champion mine assessment documents are available on our website. You can use this information to inform acquisition and price. It may be that the best use of some of these lands is no use. It may be the best use is to clear it off and put a big parking lot there. It just depends on what's on the property and what kinds of exposures people are concerned about. Finally, as part of this whole process of purchasing that property for the Nisenan, we did have an assessment done as well as an appraisal and a purchase agreement that has some elements of it that we would share with people that want to learn more about how to help a public agency acquiring a mine-scarred land minimize their liability in that acquisition process. So what have we done? Phase one, we built a trail honoring the Chinese pioneers and opening up 900 acres of BLM land. Phase two, we built a trail honoring the Nisenan property, the Nisenan people, a new bridge across Deer Creek, which provided a safe route to school for school children, which is one of the reasons everyone was so excited about that particular bridge. Phase three, we went ahead and bought a piece of property and then phase four, we're moving the trail off the road onto this piece of property. We're building fences to define the trail as well as to protect the public from exposure. These high areas of contamination, which are in two very discrete spots on the property. It's not the whole property, and it doesn't stop the ability for the tribe to use it safely. And toward that end, we have received funding to work with Nisenan to create a cultural management plan. They've called this project the Nisenan Cultural Reclamation Corridor. I think the concept of a cultural reclamation corridor is really their idea, and it's a really smart idea. It's not just a site. They're trying to make the point that the entire corridor should be informed by Nisenan practices, and we're excited to see what sort of management plan they come up with. So this is really the beginning of the project. We've only just begun the Nisenan Cultural Reclamation Corridor. We expect to be done with the trail itself by December 2021. And sometime after that, we'll begin working with the tribe to implement whatever their cultural resources management plan calls for on this property. So that's my presentation about the Nisenan Cultural Reclamation Corridor. Does anybody have any? I'm going to stop the slideshow and the recording. And then if anybody has a question, they can ask me.